Good evening, ma'am. This is my report on our subject. It's all about the identity, legal requirements for employee discipline. By the way, ma'am, my name is Dishib C. Purgatorio from the beautiful place of Naga, particularly in Barangay of Tilubog. This is the identification, ma'am. Number one, the disciplining workers is rarely pleasant, but sooner or later it is a reality for just about every employer. Whether you're dealing with minor work role infractions to the most severe of offenses or somewhere in between, having a discipline program in place can help make the process less painful and avoid possible legal complications. For example, ma'am, if your small business has employees and therefore workplace rules, at some point, these rules are bound to be broken by one of your employees. When this happens, you likely have to enforce the rules with some form of discipline. Discipline, ma'am, it doesn't mean automatic termination. In all but the most serious cases, you'll want to try to avoid terminating employees, especially if they are good workers. In fact, terminating a worker without some form of discipline, policy, and procedure could land you in court. Without a clear policy and evidence that the policy was used for the terminated employee, you could end up in your word against the employee's situation. Standardized disciplinary procedures. Employees should know that the steps and the sequence in which they occur in the disciplinary process will be the same for everyone. And a quick response. Employees should expect a quick response to violations. Appeal procedure. Employees should have the opportunity to voice their side of the story. While a full-blown appeal procedure may not be practical, you should at least give them a fair hearing before disciplinary measures are taken. Reservations of rights. If you have a written policy, you should include a statement that the policy is to be used as guidance and that you reserve the right to modify the policy in any way should the circumstances require that you do so. While this statement would not allow you to ignore your policy, it would notify the employees that there may be circumstances that will be treated differently. Ensuring fair discipline. Keep in mind that a system that is viewed as fair by the employees who must live under it is more likely to receive their support and cooperation. A fair policy also meant the disciplines must be applied consistently to all employees in all unbiased way. Quick response. Employees should expect a quick response to violation. How progressive disciplines work. In a progressive discipline system, the severity of the penalty increases with its infringement of the rules. Typically, the progressive is number 1, oral warnings, 2, written warnings, 3, suspension, 4, termination. Elements of a progressive discipline system. A progressive discipline system contains the following elements. Both you and the employee know in advance, to the extent possible, the appropriate discipline for the violation of a specific work role. And so many and etc. Progressive discipline pros and cons. While a progressive discipline system may seem like a high maintenance way to control employee behavior, it does have definite advantages. For instance, the existence of a progressive step-by-step discipline system conveys to employees that you're not out to nail them to the wall at the first sign of trouble. The existence of an adequately communicated progressive disciplinary system keeps employees informed of where they stand, and so on and so forth. Formulating a progressive disciplinary policy for your business. If you decide to implement a progressive disciplinary policy, you will need to formulate a written policy, even if you do not give to the employees, and we recommend that you don't. In creating your progressive disciplinary policy, follow this guideline. Number 1. Tailor the progressive discipline system to the business. Other business policies may serve as excellent models, but be sure your policy is appropriate for your business and your employees. 2. Specify which behaviors or infringements of work rules are not subject to progressive discipline. Usually, this will be serious behaviors that warrant immediate termination. 3. Decide whether to advise or employees of the policy. What your progressive discipline steps are, how the policy is to be applied, and what the policy does not address. 4. Decide how you will maintain documentation, i.e. memos about oral warnings, written warnings, and etc. Decide if documents will remain in a file forever, and if not, under what circumstances and timing the documentation can be removed. Conducting regular performance reviews help assist employees. While progressive discipline is designed to address the problem of employees who break work rules, it is not very effective when dealing with an employee who doesn't violate any rules but is incompetent or is not performing work to an acceptable level. For example, you may have a worker who can't seem to get much done or who keeps making mistakes that cost you a lot of money. Your business survival demands that you get rid of this person. What do you do? Assuming that the person has been with you for a while and that any new hire probation period has passed, you can resolve this problem by establishing periodic performance reviews. And that's all the topic, ma'am. Number 2. Summarize ways in which organizations can fairly discipline employees. Number 1. Change your inner voice. If the thought of having to talk to employees about their poor performance makes you uncomfortable, the worst thing you can do is avoid the issue. Letting your frustration build for weeks and months can result in you handling the situation poorly when you do give a verbal or written warning. Instead, reframe the discussion in your mind from, "This will be a difficult conversation," to, "I want to help my employee be an effective contributor." Such a shift can help change your discomfort into a more positive attitude. After all, you want your employees to be the best. It may also help to put yourself in the employee's place. You'd want to know if your boss thought you were failing and would like the chance to improve your performance. Giving your employees the benefit of the doubt does two things. 1. It gives good and mediocre employees the chance to improve and meet expectations, which is preferable to spending time and money replacing an employee for poor performance. 2. It helps you identify employees who are truly bad apples and don't care about keeping their jobs. 2. Keep your employee handbook flexible. When developing an employee handbook, many managers tend to want hard and fast rules. For instance, any employee who arrives late to work more than 3 times in a month will be terminated. The problem with using absolute terms such as will is that it leaves you not room for flexibility should employees have a legitimate reason for tardiness. To be fair and above reproach, you'll have to follow your policy. This means you'll be obligated to fire the good employee who has never had attendance problems before, just as you did the chronically late employee with poor performance. Ensuring fair discipline. Keep in mind that further, the lateness may be the result of temporary circumstances such as illness or a more serious condition that may be protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act, in which case a change in start time may be a reasonable accommodation. That said, your company is still obligated to discipline employees in a generally consistent manner. This means you must discipline your favorite employee the same as you do yours. Document details of all disciplinary conversation. This is the number 3 of my report, and number 2, questions. It's not enough to keep a detailed journal of every time an employee calls in sick on Monday, or every time 2 employees argue. For that information to be effective, you must communicate that you've noticed a trend and the behavior is troublesome. Your first step should be verbal counseling. Explain that the employee's conduct or poor performance is unacceptable. After listening to the employee and discussing corrective action, explain that repeated or continued unacceptable performance will result in more severe disciplinary action. After your discussion, send the employee an email outlining the facts of your conversation, making sure you accurately and concisely detail what was said and what the expectations are going forward. This email is enough documentation to establish a pattern of poor performance or inappropriate behavior should you need to progress to a written warning or termination. Number 4. Ensure consistency across the organization. How can you make sure your people managers are following proper procedures when it comes to employee discipline? The first piece of this puzzle is accomplished with the employee handbook. Well thought out written policies give managers a map to follow. The handbook should outline any steps deemed necessary by your organization. This usually features a progressive discipline policy of verbal counseling, then written counseling, then termination. Your company doesn't necessarily have to allow 30 to 60 or 90 days for change. It depends on the problem. It may be reasonable to expect attendance or tardiness issues to be resolved immediately, while performance issues may require time for additional training and learning. Again, your policies should be flexible enough to accommodate the wide range of issues and circumstances your managers are likely to face. Another handy way to ensure your managers aren't being overly emotional in their approach to discipline is to use a team model. To do this, have the manager as their supervisor or manager in another department to serve as a sounding board to review their notes about the problem employee and any written communications about that employee. That's all. Thank you.